Assalamualaikum everyone, thanks for coming again. This week I'm going to go ahead and get started. So just as a recap, we are still reviewing Surah Naml, which is the 27th Surah of the Qur'an. I'm sure you already got the gist by now, but just to really drive it home, Surah Naml is one of the first surahs of the Qur'an to be revealed to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in Mecca, around the second or third surah, people say. And it has many different stories in it, but it's really divided into two themes. The first theme, up until verse about 60 or so, is about being thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and appreciating the blessings that He has given you. And if you don't have any faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you won't even be able to appreciate the blessings that you've been given, and because of that you may be drawn to an even worse fate, aka Jahannam, or punishment even in this world. And so there were many different surahs that there are many different stories that we've already discussed just within this surah. In the beginning was Musa alayhi salam trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being able to perform miracles. Right after that was Sulaiman alayhi salam, who believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was granted a huge kingdom, able to speak to different animals and command the jinn, and yet never once grew arrogant and thought this was his own power. He always appreciated what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. And indeed, anytime something good happened, he even says in the surah, when the jinn came to bring the throne of the Queen of Sheba to him, instead of just thanking the jinn or basking in his own gloriousness, all he said was simply, "This is a test from my Lord to see if I am grateful or not." So, in other words, he knows the power he's been given and the responsibility he's been given is all due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he has to be grateful to him for that. Then we have the Queen of Sheba, who comes to Sulaiman alayhi salam, and she is a disbeliever straight up, but she accepts Islam after just seeing the signs and miracles that Sulaiman alayhi salam has shown her. So it shows that even if you're born into disbelief, if you put aside your own ego and embrace Islam because you know it to be the truth, then you'll not only be forgiven, but you'll be able to take advantage of the blessings you already have to their maximum, or to their full potential, I should say. She was already the queen of a huge land, had many different riches, etc. And after she accepted Islam, she was, for what we know in terms of Hadith and tafsir, she was even granted a bigger kingdom because stories say that she married Sulaiman alayhi salam, and other stories say she walked away with even more wealth than before because she was basically a vassal of Sulaiman alayhi salam's state. So that's another story that was told in Surah Naml. The previous story was Prophet Saleh alayhi salam, who spoke to the people around him and gave them many different miracles, but now the story is kind of transitioning. Instead of just being thankful for the blessings that have been granted to the people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing what will happen if you're ungrateful to him. So the people of Prophet Saleh alayhi salam, they were ungrateful to the miracles that he showed them, and they didn't accept Islam, so they were destroyed. There were still some people that did accept Islam, they weren't destroyed, and Prophet Saleh Islam definitely loved those people that embraced Islam, but at the end of the day, the people that didn't embrace it, they were all wiped out. And now we come to one of the more final stories that's being told in Surah Naml, which is the story, at least very briefly, the story of Lut alayhi salam, very infamous in this day and age, and what happened to his people when hardly any of them accepted Islam.
ولوطا إذ قال لقومه أتأتون الفاحشة وأنتم تبصرون أئنكم لتأتون الرجال شهوة من دون النساء بل أنتم قوم تجهلون فما كان جواب قومه إلا أن قالوا أخرجوا آل لوط من قريتكم إنهم أناس يتطهرون فأنجيناه وأهله إلا امرأته قدرناها من الغابرين وأمطرنا عليهم مطرا فساء مطر المنذرين
We also sent Lut to his people. He said to them, "How can you commit this outrage with your eyes wide open? How can you lust after men instead of women? What fools you are." The only answer his people gave was to say, "Expel Lot's followers from your town. These men mean to stay chaste." We saved him and his family, except for his wife. We made her stay behind, and we brought rain down on them. How dreadful that rain was for those who had been warned. Also, side note, I forgot to say this session is being recorded too. It'll be posted later on as well. Forgot to mention that at the beginning. But in these very brief 5 ayats, it's just a quick overview of Lut alayhi salam's story, and it's very distinct from the other stories if you've been listening to our previous analyses. Very distinct from the stories that have been told before in Surah Naml, in the sense that it's very brief. It barely talks about the call to prayer or the call to Islam that Lut alayhi salam does. Instead, he is basically warning them against dangers that they're already doing, the shameless act that they insist upon doing, no matter who, no matter what he says, no matter who comes, etc. And because they persisted in their action despite his warning, and despite, of course, I'm sure they've seen many miracles from him, because that's what all the prophets exhibit to their people, so that way they can believe them. Despite all that, they were destroyed because they didn't want to listen to Lut alayhi salam. So, what is the story of Lut alayhi salam? Lut, very briefly, was the nephew of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he was sent to the people of, well, people consider it the city of Sodom, but we don't really have a name for it in the Quran. Sodom is just what the Bible calls the city at that time. And when he went there, it's already a very difficult task because they were already progressing in sin. He had his work cut out for him. And even more so, they were doing a sin that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says no one had ever done before they had come. So if we want to try to put a timeline to it, this is probably even before the ancient Greeks had even, come up and tried to philosophize. It's that old. So in any case, they were doing a sin no one had ever done before, and Lut alayhi salam persists in trying to warn them against doing this sin, and yet they just laugh at him and they don't want to listen to him. And he doesn't have very many followers that come to Islam or abandon the sin. I mean, even his own wife was partaking and supporting the non-believers. So in any case, one time for Ibrahim alayhi salam, 3 strangers came to him and walked into his door, and he was surprised, of course, but he served them food, and then they refused the food. So Ibrahim alayhi salam asked, "Who are you? What do you want?" Because no one would just refuse food like this. And those 3 men told him that they were angels, that they were coming to warn him about something bad that would happen to the city that Lut alayhi salam was in. And Ibrahim, of course, alayhi salam, he's very worried about Lut alayhi salam, and he tells them, "Oh, but Lut is there." And the angels go, "Trust me, we know better than you, who is in that city." So they kind of reassure him that Lut alayhi salam will be saved. They go to his city, and when they're walking in, the angels are disguised as 3 very beautiful men. A very great disguise for the city of Sodom, clearly. But the daughter of Lut alayhi salam actually notices the 3 men and goes to hurry and warn her father about them. And Lut alayhi salam comes up and tries to convince these men, because he didn't know that they were angels, he tries to convince them to leave, which of course they don't. They're here to warn him, so he's bringing them back into his own house as guests. And when he brings them into his own house, he settles them down and tries to talk to them about, like, the business that they've come for, etc. But his wife notices these men and goes to tell all the non-believers about them, that Lut alayhi salam is hosting these people in his house. And so all the city comes to harass Lut alayhi salam in his house. And Lut alayhi salam then asks them all to leave because he's disturbing, or all the entire town is disturbing the guests that he's trying to host. And they're just mocking him. They're saying, "No, we're not going to leave." And Lut alayhi salam is very scared, and he just wishes to have some power that he could rely on or something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at that moment, one of the angels, and some of the tafsir say this is Angel Jibreel, Allahu Alam, one of the angels comes up to him and says, "They won't be able to enter this house because we 3 are angels, and we have come to warn you of the disaster that will befall this city soon." So when the angels go out to leave, they actually blind everyone that's in front of the doors. And so the people scatter, but they tell Lut alayhi salam that tomorrow he'll get his reckoning. They intend to kill him and his whole family. So that very night, Lut alayhi salam goes to run out of the city and abandon them because the angels have warned him he doesn't have anyone that he can take except for his own family. And as he's walking out, the angels and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala start to rain down the punishment upon Lut alayhi salam's former city. The punishment is pretty severe. According to the tafsir, Jibreel alayhi salam, or some of the angels, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, actually takes the city by one of its corners, flips it basically on top of it, on top of each other, like like you're flipping a pancake almost. That's how the city was inverted. Everyone was slammed down, and then after that, pebbles were poured onto the city, so that way nothing remained at all. And some tafsirs say that each of these clay pebbles had the name of the transgressor that it was meant for, but no one can verify that information. In any case, or some people also say it's a volcanic eruption. In any case, whatever it is, the city is completely destroyed. Now, the Bible says that in this area, which they say is around the Dead Sea, it's going to be a place that nothing will ever grow ever again. It'll be full of sulfur, salt, etc. This is what it says in Deuteronomy, I think, that the land of Sodom will become a place where nothing can grow. And in the Quran, it's important to note that Lut alayhi salam's wife does not make it out. She, just so right here in Surah Naml it says that we saved him and his family except for his wife. We made her stay behind, which is a little bit different from the Bible story, where the Bible has Lut alayhi salam's entire family running away from the city as it's being destroyed. She turns around to watch the city being destroyed, and then she turns into a pillar of salt and dies straight up like that. That's not what the Quran says, but we could entertain it if you want to, because no one can verify it. At the end of the day, the city is destroyed. Nothing remains of it, all because of that sin that no one else had ever committed before the city. And several different lessons here. One lesson is these people didn't even want to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They abandoned their prophet. They didn't even appreciate the blessing that they had been given, wealth, food, health, etc. And they lusted after something that was completely impermissible, even after Lut alayhi salam came to warn them of this danger. There's not even a mention of anything that might save them. At least with Prophet Salih alayhi salam's story, we have the she-camel that was a miraculous event that happened that might save some individuals. But with Lut alayhi salam's people, there's nothing like that. They had to abandon this act or give up, and it seems from the Quranic story that barely any of them abandoned this act at all. Lut alayhi salam couldn't even save his own wife. So this story is like a nice, well, I don't want to say nice, but it's a transition from before, where Musa alayhi salam is partaking in all the blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has no hardship except for the test that he's been given to give the message to Fir'aun. And every single story after that slowly adds a little bit more negative, I don't want to say negativity, but more tests, more struggles for the prophets, for the peoples, etc., until we get to Lut alayhi salam's story, where there's really no positive to it. There's no one that accepted, that we could tell from this story in Surah Naml. In fact, all we see is just the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas before, at least with the Queen of Sheba, for example, we saw, how you can get infinite more blessings by accepting Islam, as well as embracing the blessings you already have. In this story, there's nothing like that. And then, of course, we have the entire reason why the city was destroyed. I don't think there's any reason to go more into it unless people would like to when we open the floor up to discussion. But in any case, it is a severe sin, and people want to say, oh, the Quran doesn't say it so explicitly. It's more about this, that. No, the Quran is very explicit. It says it right there in Surah Naml 2, and there's no, in every translation, we have 4 different translations here, and there are more we could add. Everyone says it very explicitly what the sin was. So there's no question about why the city was destroyed. That being said, we have to do the best we can in this world too. So Lut alayhi salam had his work cut out for him. At least with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was sent to a people that were just practicing polytheism, and that was a sin that was done by many people in the past. If you think about it, Lut alayhi salam's work was super hard. Going to a people that had no hope at all of redemption unless the sin was abandoned. We don't even know if they're monotheistic or not. That's how bad the sin was. In any case, the Prophet ﷺ, Lut alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, all the prophets that came, they all had several unique troubles, and they all had their own ways to deal with it. At the end of the day, for us, it's important to remember we try to stick to the Quran and Sunnah as much as possible and continue to reflect on the Quran as best as we can. And so now this kind of marks the end of the first theme of Surah Naml. which is being thankful for the blessings you have, and only by being thankful can you avoid the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and can you avoid going to the Jahannam, just enjoying the worldly life and being distracted, etc. Now we'll start transition to a different theme that inshallah we'll explore more next week. But I think that's enough of me rambling on. I'll open the floor to anyone who wants to add on what they were thinking during these 5 verses or any questions they might have. Well, if that's it, then Jazakallah khairan to everyone for coming this week. And inshallah, we'll have it again next week on Saturday, inshallah, unless something comes up again. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.